in many cases more convenient and reliable than using a debit card or a credit card, and quite often those will fail or require a lot of information and then fail. Whereas Bitcoin is more like a cash-like experience. So you pay and it's finished, right?
Thank you very much for joining us today. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us what you're currently working on?
So I'm Adam Back, co-founder and CEO of Blockstream, and also co-founder and CEO of BSTR, or BSTAR, which is the Bitcoin Standard Treasury Company, a public market treasury company waiting for regulatory approval in the US.
You're one of the few people Satoshi corresponded with. What's a lesson or idea from the early days that you wish the entire crypto community would relearn?
Well, I think the ideas are the same. It's just that it was very early in the technology development. I think Satoshi had already implemented the kind of alpha or beta version of the protocol before he started talking about it, emailing and posting on some of the discussion forums. I got the first email in August 2008. And then I guess later in the year, he posted the white paper on some of the forums, and then the source code and started the network in early January 2009. And, the ideas were the same, which is to make a bearer electronic cash with proof of work mining to create coins and to, see if that would take off, basically.
What's the biggest misconception people have about Bitcoin?
I think you see a lot of confusion. People will say things like, they're not sure about how to value it, like what's the valuation framework, and that it's not generating return. So it's not an operating company that has a cash flow, of course, because it's like digital gold. So gold also doesn't have a cash flow. And I think, the concept of decentralized but electronic things is hard to grasp. People will be skeptical that that's possible. And it is an innovative bit of technology that makes that possible to make scarce in the digital world, because most things in the digital world are actually very easy to copy, infinitely copyable almost, right? And yet Bitcoin is very scarce and very strongly enforce scarcity. And that is basically because of the mining, which is actually physically scarce, even though the Bitcoin, the coins are electronic and be transferred electronically.
And on the flip side, is there anything the Bitcoin community is failing to understand?
Well, I think that, there are a lot of people now who they have not invested in shares or companies or IPOs. And so they view everything that is not Bitcoin as a shitcoin. And that includes, Swiss francs, dollars, public market companies that make computers or anything as bad investments or dubious investments. And it's, of course, true that Bitcoin is a trustless thing because it's a bearer hard money. You can physically store it yourself, where with a operating company, you are relying on the management of the company for decisions and, the auditors to prove that to audit that the financial statements are correct and so forth. So there's a different trust trade-off, but companies are able to, access the capital markets and do capital formation to build products. And that's a big part of today's, economic prosperity comes down to, the invention of public companies or companies organized by shares and the ability to raise capital for risk venture.
We are currently hearing a lot about layer 2 solutions like Liquid and Lightning. For a non-technical audience, is this Bitcoin's broadband moment?
I think the Bitcoin main chain or base layer is the most secure way to store Bitcoin and the most unseizable bearer version. But it's hard to scale. And, as more people get interested in Bitcoin, it's hard to provide them all with a UTXO with on-chain storage. So I think the layer 2s provide some advantages for fast or cheaper payments, more scalable payments, and also, the promise in the future of a more scalable storage and privacy and, additional capabilities for Bitcoin that we would want. So I think ultimately, the baseline layer becomes like TCP/IP for the internet, and then everything else, the other functionalities and applications are built on top.
Do you think we will soon see a wave of apps built on top of Bitcoin that people use every day, perhaps even without realizing it?
Maybe in the longer term. I mean, I think for now it's just interesting to see a more scalable, private, and faster transacting capability, because the killer application for Bitcoin so far has been the savings technology or the investment technology, that you buy Bitcoin, the asset, you can transact it without permission, you can create a wallet without permission, you can, store and save money for the future. So that is, the kind of native network functionality, if you like. And so far that's been, the biggest use case. Now, of course, there are applications that build on top of that and companies that invest in it, and, all kinds of different entities that are interested to invest in the asset class. And there are applications that use it for micropayments or for, purchasing things. It's certainly, in many cases, more convenient and reliable than using a debit card or a credit card. And quite often those will fail or, require a lot of information and then fail. Whereas Bitcoin is more like a cash-like experience. So you pay, and it's finished, right?
Blockstream currently launched Simplicity, a new smart contract language. In simple terms, what new capabilities does it unlock?
Yeah, so Simplicity is sort of next generation smart contracting language designed for Bitcoin ultimately, but we deployed it in Liquid because Liquid is a more permissionless layer 2, and perhaps in the future it might get adopted by Bitcoin if there's ecosystem consensus to do that. Now, the point with Simplicity is that it's a much lower level language, so you can think about it, for programmers like it's microcode or something where you can sort of soft fork in or add functionality without requiring soft fork. So I've at times described it as the last soft fork for Bitcoin. And so I think that's the promise, really, that Satoshi had in the early days some comment on one of the forums that he had rushed the scripting system for Bitcoin because he thought that once Bitcoin was launched, it would be sort of ossified, set in stone for all time, as he called it. And so, the promise there was that he expected or hoped that this scripting system would enable people to build the other, layer 2s and functionality using the script system. But in practice, the script system was a bit limited and there were some early security defects. And so some of the opcodes got disabled. So I think Simplicity basically sort of achieves that intent, let's say, but of course, many years later.
You've mentioned that Satoshi posted different things in different forums. If you were to describe his character traits, what kind of person do you think he was?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say because he was, I only interacted with him via email early on, and afterwards I didn't really get involved until he'd actually left. So I didn't have, interactive discussions on the forums, but I did go and read a lot of the things he'd said on the Bitcoin Talk forum and that other people had sort of to catch up with the learnings from the first years, so from 2009 to 2013. And I mean, he didn't do a great deal of philosophical discussion. It was very concise, sort of technical, focused discussion. But, sort of impression is of somebody very curious, very inventive, and, not prone to emotional outbursts. It's all kind of, calm and constructive and trying to improve Bitcoin, basically.
Governments are moving from banning Bitcoin to regulating it and even considering it as a reserve asset. Do you see this as a threat or validation or maybe something else for Bitcoin in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's viewed, people have different views about that. Now, it's clear that having a sort of open for business regulatory environment helps Bitcoin get adoption into some parts of the market, right? So that much is positive. And then, of course, there's also the other thing, which you mentioned, is that some governments are talking about buying Bitcoin at the government level or at the regional state level. And of course, there are, sovereign wealth funds and the Swiss National Bank and some pension funds, public pension funds, some individual states, some countries doing mining. So there's a bit of it happening. But, I think for me, I'm not really in a rush to strongly advocate for governments to buy Bitcoin. I think they can buy it organically when they feel like it. And it's almost preferable, to my point of view, that the individual have more time to buy Bitcoin. Now, of course, the individual's had a great deal of time, 15 years, and has actually, a number of individuals front run or bought Bitcoin before the professional investors and the fund managers did. But I think it's still early for Bitcoin. And so, the introduction of ETFs is another way that a different group of individuals can buy Bitcoin, because it's sort of simplified and they can talk to their broker or financial advisor. So, I think some time for those group of investors to be able to buy Bitcoin is also useful.
How do you see the future of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think, continued user adoption. I think it's still relatively early, and more kind of layer 2 technology and ease of use improvements to make it easier to use Bitcoin. Now, of course, some people are using Bitcoin via custodians, via ETFs, or by investing in companies that themselves are buying Bitcoin. So I think it's also important that the self-custody technology keeps pace and improves and becomes easier to use, because people get higher assurances, more bearer assurances by buying and self-custodying Bitcoin. So it's important for that to continue, and for more users to make use of that, and for that technology to get easier to use and more reliable.
Do you have any smart tips or advice for the community?
Yeah, I think it's useful to practice, to try it out, to set up a wallet, to set up some cold storage, to do the backup. Even if you don't have all of the assets in it, it's a useful part of the learning experience to try native Bitcoin, to try Lightning for payments. And it's also interesting to have some, Bitcoin that is not connected to a bank account. So some kind of more private Bitcoin that you acquire in a sort of OTC or cash transaction, because that is a kind of more private type of Bitcoin. So therefore a better insurance policy.